Well, good morning. Welcome to week 1 of Advent, the season when we remember the days leading up to the birth of Jesus the Christ. And given the season, people might expect me to deviate from the sermon topic we've been examining these 3 weeks, overcoming our fear. So I thought about it. I rolled it around in my noggin for a while, wondering whether I should move to a more festive or poignant or inspiring or more holiday appropriate or holiday expected theme. And I'd like to invite you into my thought process for a moment. Scholars differ on the exact birth date of Jesus of Nazareth, though a fair consensus holds that it was not the year 1 CE. Many historians favor a date in or around 4 BCE. And for today's purposes, let's take that as accurate, okay? So if that is so, the birth occurred during or near a truly dreadful time in the history of what was already a troubled and turbulent land. Most non-historians aren't familiar with what was happening at that time, perhaps because the events during that time have been given so many different names, including the War of Varus. There's the First Judean War, which most of us are more familiar with. There's also the Archelaean Revolt. But none of these names describe just how tenuous and that socio-political climate was then. To put it in a nutshell, in the midst of political turmoil and religious unrest, King Herod the Great died in 4 BC. Immediately following his death, Judea entered a period of revolution and violence that in many ways foreshadows the better known events of 66 CE, the Jewish War, commemorated by Josephus. It was a time of abominable violence and bloodshed, the kind that the world had not seen before. And the world desperately needed a light. And that light came in the form of a beautiful, wise, and humble Messiah from Nazareth, a man about whom prophets foretold, and the world still sings of to this day, a man unlike any other we have on record. In Jesus, the Christ consciousness was fully orbed. It could not be said where the man ended and the divine began. And here we are, more than 2,000 years later, living in a time when war and unrest are once again manifest in lands all over the world. A time when 85 years after the last global conflict, we are hearing the news pundits, fear and conspiracy theorists, and social media influencers shout their fears surrounding the potential for another world war, whether those fears are real or just noisy dragons in their minds. And so it is more than abundantly clear to me that we're in desperate need of reawakening. What do I mean by that? I mean that we were each born to be a light in the world. Jesus taught us that, as have many others throughout the world and throughout history, we were born to shine, and our glow is dimmed by the fear in our minds. Our brains are all so busy with trying to keep our head above water and our needs met that we forget to turn the light on sometimes, I think. But do we need another Messiah? Another master teacher to come and try to lead us back to our true selves? No. We have all the knowledge we need. It's been neatly chronicled and cataloged and examined, fully pulled apart. And if we're being completely honest, we'll say that some of the folks who put the pieces back together again were missing a few and maybe created a picture that I don't think Jesus ever wanted for himself. Why do we need another to come and save humanity from the insanity of its humanness when we've already been given all the lessons in our divinity that we need? Let us save ourselves by facing our fears head on and learning compassion, both for ourselves and others, as we untangle those many ways that our fear has molded our behavior. When we understand that all of our icky behaviors come from, like it or not, a place of fear, we realize that there is no enemy. And so we're staying the course. So we've been looking at our fears through the lens of Jose Stevens in his book, Transforming Your Dragons, How to Turn Fear Patterns into Personal Power. And he's cleverly broken the personality types which are demonstrated through our fears into 7 categories, and he has assigned a dragon to each category, which adds an aura of empowerment to the idea that we can overcome our fears, or in the language of Jose Stevens, we can slay our personal dragons, and we can also learn to identify others' dragons and therefore find compassion where judgment and conflict would have once taken root. So last week we looked at the dragons of arrogance and self-deprecation, and we realized that both of those came from someplace in our early development when we began to believe that we weren't good enough on our own, where we began to believe that love was conditional and that our condition wasn't lovable. And from there, one child might build a nest for the arrogance dragon by beginning to pretend to be someone else, someone that they think is better, never actually really learning who they are. They begin to ruthlessly berate themselves over any perceived slip, meanwhile keeping everyone in the world at arm's length so nobody can see through their mask and find something lacking. Now, another child might build a nest for the dragon of self-deprecation by agreeing with their perception of others' feelings about them. They identify with not being enough. They find comfort in warning the world well in advance that they're not good enough in pretty much every way imaginable, so that nobody develops hope in them because they're convinced that even if they succeed once, surely they can't do it again. Rather than trying to hide the flaws they believe exist within them, they embrace them, and they continually drive that belief in inadequacy further and further forward and inward until they destroy their chance at happiness. Both dragons are about a person not feeling loved. And I know I can speak for every parent or person with a nurturing heart in the room when I say that the thought of that is heartbreaking. The mom in me wants desperately to take all of the beautiful souls who believe so little of themselves and snuggle them until they realize how precious and loved they are. And they always have been. Today we're looking at the dragons of impatience and martyrdom. And something tells me quite a few of us are going to feel like snuggling folks with those dragons too. Now, you'll remember that each of the 7 dragons was broken into 7 steps of development, which the book really, really delves into. I can only touch on a tiny bit of it during the few minutes I have up here each week. So you'll want to get your hands on a copy so you can do the work and send those dragons packing. I do have a couple more copies in the bookstore today. Slowly but surely, they're getting here. Hopefully they will have all arrived by the time we're done. But there are also 7 affirmations to kind of empower you to beat the dragon, as well as 7 weapons and 7 exercises to transform the dragon. So the impatience dragon, it's positive poles, he says. And remember, we're talking polarity, right? Like either end of a battery, okay? We're not talking about telephone poles here. So the positive pole is daring, and the negative pole is intolerance. Its external manifestation may appear as someone who's easily excitable, brusque, snappish, short-tempered, short-fused, often angry, intolerant, abrupt, rash, hasty, reckless, rude. Its internal manifestation, however, may feel like nervousness, anxiety, jitteriness, agitation, impulsivity, fretfulness, antsiness, heedlessness, or impetuousness. And he notes on page 142, not everyone who appears restless is impatient. Some people are simply more active and have greater kinesthetic response to their environments. They also may pace, kick their feet, or in general find it hard to sit still. They are not in the same kind of distress as impatient people. And I am so grateful he said that. I'm not impatient. I'm just really eager to do and experience all of the things. And sitting still when interesting things are happening around me, which is most of the time, it can be kind of hard for me. Anyway, to get the feel for the impatience dragon, he says, strongly anticipate a future event that you cannot do anything about right now. Something way in the distance. Try to project your mind ahead of all the traffic that you might run into as you're getting there to see what's causing the delay. And to do that, you kind of move your head forward and squint your eyes, right? Don't accept your situation. You resist it. You got to resist the traffic. That is the state of people living with the dragon of impatience. That is the state that they experience all or most of the time, that panic. Imagine trying to form a real connected relationship with another person. Can you experience a real depth of intimacy when you're always in your mind obsessing over future events and whether or not they will go according to whatever timeline you may feel like making around them? And how much of that time that you're spending thinking and planning and figuring out shortcuts for each of the scenarios you've dreamed up, how much of that is related to anything which may actually come to pass? All of that time spent locked inside your torment, when you could be enjoying life and learning to love people in a real connected way, in a way which has the potential to transform your life into one more joyful simply because that person is in it. How sad and lonely that must feel inside, and how angry and ill-tempered and reactive those feelings make us appear to be on the outside. The 7 steps of the development of the impatience dragon are: 1, the child is rushed. Very small children are not future-oriented, but are totally in the present. Okay? However, so rushing to small children, it makes no sense whatsoever, right? Because they're just going along with what's happening. But they are capable of responding emotionally to the activities going on in their families. So after a while, with all this rushing, the child begins to believe rushing is how to be in the world. It's how to survive. Okay? 2, the child associates fear with rushing. Remember, although they have solely lived in the present up to this point, very young children can understand the emotions surrounding what's happening around them. So they pick up the fear that something is bad or wrong and that everybody is rushing to escape it as if it were a monster. And as a result, they begin to believe rushing must be important to my survival. 3, the child learns that time is limited. They learn to tell time, right? In school, the clocks are everywhere, and they begin their training in navigating time through bell schedules and the like. So arriving late for any one of those school bells, of course, means braving disapproving stares and frowns and glances at watches by teachers. They begin to believe time is something that there is too little or too much of. 4, the child begins to associate goals with limited time frame. Okay, impatient children develop the concept of goal setting, but associate the fear of lack of time to these goals. This awareness pushes these children to think of the future all the time. If time is in short supply, they must rush to get as much done in that time as possible. They begin to believe, I must rush to complete my goals. If I don't, I'll never complete them. Okay, 5, the child learns that time can be lost. Stephen says on page 151, the process of haste has other negative side effects. When people rush, they tend to become sloppy in their execution of tasks. The result is many mistakes and even accidents. Of course, mistakes and accidents take up time, and according to impatient people, time is lost. Thus, the dragon creates these people's worst fear, the loss of time. When time is apparently lost this way, these people feel terrible, as if somehow they lost a game for good. This becomes a chronic feeling, creating much suffering. 6, the child feels trapped by time. Impatient children learn to feel that they are prisoners of time and that time is an obstacle outside of themselves. These children begin to whine and complain that there simply isn't enough time to do everything. They begin to believe, I am the victim of time, particularly the lack of time. I am a prisoner. And 7, the children or the child learns that the present is not important. Impatient children are not taught to enjoy the processes of life's experiences, but rather to wish for them to be over with. Right? The child begins to believe the present is not important, get rid of it. And to me, this particular trait of the impatience dragon is one of the most detrimental. We are put here to experience, to learn, to become, and fulfill our divine purpose. If we're always in our minds, we'll never do any of those things. Our whole amazing life, that gift that we've all been given, will be spent in the unending circles in our brains instead of out here with us living. And I find that so very sad. Let's try to remember that the next time we're out doing our holiday tasks, right? We've all got them. Let's remember that when we run into someone who is letting their impatience dragon roar. Maybe we can say or do something kind and just connect with that person real quick so that maybe just for a moment, they can come into now for a change, right? Give them a little bit of joy, a little bit of acknowledgement, bring them out of their heads and right there with you, because a little bit of compassion can unlock the imaginary shackles of time that they believe themselves to be trapped in. Now, if you want to know those 7 affirmations I talked about to beat the impatience dragon, you have to get your hands on a copy of the book. But here are the 7 weapons to transform the dragon. 1, waste time. Spending unstructured time calls for spontaneity and being in the moment. The goal is simply being here now. Okay? 2, learn silence. The antidote to all of the rush and hustle bustle and noise of the impatience dragon is silence. Silence slows you down. It quiets your mind and brings you into the moment. This orientation to the present moment creates a powerful challenge for people with this dragon, because it makes you more aware than ever of that fearful state of impatience. Be with it. Let yourself feel the anxiety of not doing anything, because little by little, it'll become comfortable. 3, he says, cut out intrusion. This isn't easy, considering that if you have the impatience dragon, you don't know what an unnecessary intrusion is. To begin with, turn off radios and televisions and other sources of noise. Seek and learn to create peaceful environments. 4, be graceful. He says on page 169, if you are under the influence of the impatience dragon, you have a tendency towards clumsiness and quick, dangerous movements. This makes you quite deadly behind the wheel of a car, where you often engage in such sports as tailgating, passing on the shoulder or on the right, speeding in fog, dust, rain, or snow, and changing 3 lanes in one fell swoop, or, as my nanny used to say, one swell foop. I always loved it when she said that. You are known for knocking over floor lamps, flower pots, vases, statues, drinks. You are constantly hurting yourself by crashing into everything. You do not need to battle the dragon the hard way. Slow down. With a little discipline and attention, impatience can be eased little by little. 5, develop rhythm. All of life operates within a rhythm. Rhythm is intrinsic to all that we do, okay? Relaxation promotes the healthy rhythm of the heartbeat. Fear disrupts it. So relax. Find and focus on your rhythm there, and then let it move into other areas of your life. 6, he says, be mindful. Your weapon of choice is paying attention and being aware. Noticing where your body is, what your hands are doing, and what your mind is thinking are all practices in being mindful. Not to be confused with the mindfulness demure movement on social media. That's a whole different thing. 7, learn the true nature of time. Time cannot be touched, seen, tasted, smelled, or heard. If time has so little substance, how can it keep control over your life? And finally, there's 7 exercises to transform the impatient dragon. And I will note that several of these are redundant with the weapons I just listed, but I think he wanted to stay within the model of 7s, so apparently we have to revisit them. So 1, experience unstructured time. Okay? 2, become silent. 3, learn to cut out intrusions. 4, develop gracefulness. 5, develop rhythm. And 6, develop mindfulness. And 7, play with time. Spend time in the moment, allowing yourself to move from one activity to the next in a fluid, non-controlling way, a way that's free from thoughts or control or rushing. You can do that. And it'll become fun, I promise. At the beginning might be unsettling, but it will become fun. And that moves us into our next dragon, the dragon of martyrdom. Its positive pole is selflessness. Its negative pole is victimization. And remember, that is polarity, like in a magnet, okay? Externally, it can manifest as someone who is whiny or complaining, resentful, spiteful, guilt-inducing, acting woe is me, blaming, sighing, acting exploited or taken advantage of, long-suffering, self-righteous, ooh, I hate that one, or stricken. Internally, the person suffering from this dragon feels agonized, immolated, tortured, anguished, trapped, persecuted, victimized, and tortured. He says on page 184, to get the feeling of this dragon's influence, produce a pained look on your face, okay? But then carry a spiteful look in your eyes while you're doing it, okay? As if the way you feel is someone else's fault. Hunch your shoulders up in the back, but not forward, so I messed it up. So I don't know. Hunch them up in the back, but not forward. I don't know what that is. Get the notion that you're carrying a heavy weight on your shoulders so that your movement is restricted. Feel trapped or oppressed as if someone else is causing you to feel miserable. That is about as close as you can get to the flavor of martyrdom, he says. What is your relationship to the world from this position? The 7 steps of development for the martyrdom dragon are: 1, the child feels unwelcome to assert themselves. They recognize that their family is somehow not happy with their normal attempts to grow and develop. The child begins to believe, I am not okay. I am unlovable. 2, the child experiences a double bind. The child sees that if they assert themselves, they are damned. If they don't assert themselves, they cannot develop. The dragon of martyrdom is birthed by the belief in the idea of being trapped without any alternatives. They are known for saying, yes, but to every offered solution or help. He says on page 191, martyrs can defeat most therapists in a short time. When therapists give up in frustration, the martyrs feel victimized once again and resentful for the lack of help. The belief here is life is about being trapped. I am trapped. I am a victim of others. 3, the child begins to hold in anger. They stop asserting themselves, finding that developing independence only backfires. They begin to believe, I will never assert myself or fight for what I want. 4, the child learns to blame. They learn to avoid feeling worthless by blaming someone else for their suffering. The belief becomes it's always other people's fault. Blame them. 5, the child makes others feel guilty. Revenge is sweet could be their slogan here. Children under the influence of the martyrdom dragon learn to get back at others for what they did. They withhold pleasure and forgiveness. Their belief becomes, make others feel bad for causing me pain. 6, the child wins by suffering. He says on page 190, subconsciously, children affected by the martyrdom dragon learn to make choices that lead to the known experience of suffering. Later in life, they always seem to make disastrous choices and go from one catastrophe to the next. This is the real tragedy of the martyrdom dragon, because the purpose of life becomes to suffer. The belief is, I can win by suffering. 7, the child complains to the wrong people. He says on page 195, martyr children need an outlet for their pain and frustration, so they complain of their plight to people who can't do anything about their problems. As children, these people were punished for asserting themselves. So they learned right away to avoid talking to the people who wounded them. They discovered it was always safer to let off steam with other people who would feel sorry for them. They usually avoid reasonable solutions to their problems because they need to keep the idea of suffering present. Who would feel sorry for them if they had nothing to complain about, right? After all, they say to themselves, there is nothing else about them that others would care about. The suffering becomes their identity. The martyrdom dragon wants victims to believe that someone else is always at fault. There's always someone else to blame for their suffering. People with the martyrdom dragon cling to this belief, and half of them believes it. However, deep down, they don't believe it at all. They are certain that they are victimized because they are truly undeserving and worthless. And once again, my mother's heart wants to help. The 7 weapons for slaying the martyrdom dragon are: 1, tell the truth. Admit that you use the strategy of manipulation. I'm pretty sure I don't have to break that one apart, right? You don't need specific instructions on that. No, you have to be real with you. That's all internal work. 2, draw boundaries and hold them. Say no and mean it. It's hard to be a victim over everyday events when you're the one calling the shots. Stop giving your power away. 3, admit your needs and ask for help. Become a team player. There is no one to blame but yourself if you don't ask for what you need. Specifically, ask people who are capable and able to help with your need. That's a big deal right there. 4, give up the pleasure of sympathy from others. Stop complaining. I know that's hard. Hold it in. You got this, okay? 5, take responsibility and choose. See and accept alternatives, okay? 6, be willing to have fun. Let others see and enjoy your pleasure, because joy is contagious. 7, give up blaming and always being right. That's a tough one, but I know we're all capable of it, right? Baby steps, okay? So 7 exercises to transform the martyrdom dragon. That is really hard to get out of your mouth. Exercise 1, always say yes to offers of help. I know that's a tough one, because if we get help, the problem might be resolved, right? And if the problem is resolved, then how are we going to get attention, right? That is the wrong question. Who's going to feel sorry for us? Wrong question. The right question is, if this problem is solved, what other problem can I solve? It all starts with 1 step. You've got this. I know it. Exercise 2, make a practice of admitting error and responsibility. Another really tough one, and that's tough for all of us, even if you don't got that dragon. It is hard to stand up and go, that was me, right? But if you want that dragon to go away so that you can really step into your life the way it was meant to be, you got to learn to raise your hand and say, that was totally my bad, before anyone accuses you of it being your bad, right? Proudly go, yep, me. Okay? And it's actually, I have found in my experience that when you do that, people go, oh, okay, I'm not mad. Because you're not trying to hide anything. People cannot meet that kind of ownership with the same kind of anger behind it. That's just been my experience. Exercise 3, practice saying no. Hold your boundaries. This is an oddly specific exercise, okay? And it begins with role playing. Your friends play people who ask you for big favors that you don't want to do, okay? And so you have to stick to your guns and say no, no matter how compelling they may seem, okay? It is a role-playing exercise. The next version of that exercise focuses on your ability to get what you want and not give up. So your friend plays a mechanic trying to weasel out of a shoddy job on your car, and you play a person who is returning your car because it is not working after expensive repairs. Your job is to request that the car be fixed and to not take no for an answer. And he says, play through other iterations of those types of scenarios until you get so good at it that nobody can manipulate you. And you know it. That's the key. You need to know it. Exercise 4, list all choices, even if they don't seem attractive. Choose. This exercise is another one that's good for role-playing scenarios. You want someone else there pointing out all the possibilities. Your job is to actually consider each alternative or solution without resorting to, yes, but, and he notes that this process may bring up rage for you. So he cautions that you might want to make sure that your role-playing partner is a therapist or other such person who knows how to work with any big emotions that might come up. Exercise 5, pursue at least 1 pleasure a day. Make a list of things you'd like to experience. Foods, material things, experiences like walks in the park or trips, spending time with people, affection, taking naps, things like that. And then make a point of doing at least one of those things every day. Sounds easy, right? We can do that. Okay, exercise 6, list your complaints, then burn them. Yes, I am a fan of the burning bowl method of healing, but this is not an exercise that I wrote. Okay, this came from Jose Stevens himself. So make that list and then bring them in to safely and mindfully burn them in our burning bowl. Okay, he says, do this until the dragon has nothing more to say. You will feel better. Anybody else, anybody done the burning bowl thing and felt better through it? Yeah, I sure have. So last exercise, 7, sustain the outward expression of assertiveness. If you have a martyrdom dragon, you may have little success in sustaining your point of view or sticking to your guns in the face of resistance. This may be reflected in your posture and expression. So stand up straight, meet the world with your head held high, and start to smile confidently. In my experience, very few people have the chutzpah to bully someone who is smiling broadly and looking them in the eye. Apparently, there's something quite intimidating about that. So give it a shot. So once again, we see that our dragons, they come from a place of feeling like we're not enough, that we're not lovable as we are. The thing we have to remember about today's dragons is this: they can both be beaten. Yes, it will take looking your dragon in the eye and telling it who's boss. And by that, I mean you. okay? You are the boss. Remember that. But you can do this. And if you think that you can't possibly do this all by yourself, look around you. There are people right here in this room who will be more than happy to help. And for those of you online, reach out. Our contact info is on our website at santanitachurch.org. Call or email, and let's see if we can find you a partner or a solution to help when exercises start to feel too daunting, okay? We are here to help folks transform their lives. And that means everyone, not just the people in this room. So you folks online are a part of this now. Let us meet you. If the driving force behind all that is in fact love, then love is the solution to every problem. And so the ultimate weapon to transform any dragon is always love, no matter how big or scary those dragons might pretend to be. And remember, folks, if you hear something in these talks that resonates with you, or with your experience in life, or your observation of other people's experiences, don't judge. Don't judge yourself or others. You and they are not the dragons. The dragons are inside, stealing your joy and your happiness. And together we can defeat them. You don't believe me? Come back next week. If you're here in person, we will have pancakes and coffee and maybe eggs, and there might be bacon involved. And we'll meet a couple more dragons. Maybe you'll find something there that inspires you to bravely stand tall and shout, "You are nothing but a little lizard, but I am the great I am." Honey, no dragon can stand up to that power once you've stepped into it. Thank you.